maybe a little bit more of the burden of proof is on you, Jane, perhaps, maybe, I don't know. But let's let you go first because, since Barbara's the sitting, I realize not elected incumbent, but the sitting office holder. So help me understand why you want to displace her.
And how much time do I have to answer this question?
Well, just take a minute. Just take a couple minutes because let's just set the outline.
It's not quite easy to do.
Let's set the outline of the issues that we want to discuss from both sides, and then we'll go through it. Okay.
Okay. So, who I am is I grew up in the Lower East Side of New York City in a housing project. I came out to California in 1968 and been politically active ever since. I've been on this. I was a public school teacher. I was a lawyer for International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, representing PG&E employees. I then ran for city council. I've been on the city council for 15 years. And I've been a civil rights and labor attorney the time I've been on the council. I've taken a lot of leadership in the city of Oakland I just finished negotiating the Army base, where it's going to be 7,000 jobs, a year-long process, where we had East and West Oakland residents. We had the contractors, the developer, the city, the unions, and we came up with a total consensus of 50% of the jobs would go to Oakland residents and 50% of the contracts. I've also taken leadership on foreclosure issues. I decided to step down from the city council because it will have been 16 years. Then John Russo left, and I decided that I would run for city attorney. And I'm running because I have watched that office for 15 years, and I think it needs to be changed. I think there's a lot of problems. I think that one is things take too long to answer. An example is, and I hear this from all over the place, from residents, from city staff, from developers, contractors. An example is the Army base took 2 years to finish for the negotiation for the contract. We almost lost $243 million because the contract wasn't finished. A little example, the sewer, very yucky, but the sewer in the city backed up into my house. I didn't get a response from being a resident for a year and a half.
You didn't get a response for what?
Get a response to my claim for a year and a half. And I only happened to get a response because I happened to walk in the door this time the city attorney walked in. Settlements. I think that the city attorney's office settles too many cases.
So your personal claim on your sewer backup
took a year and a half. Now I didn't call in and say basically when I have something that goes on in the city, I generally am a resident because I like to see what happens.
How much was your claim?
What was my claim?
How much was your claim?
Oh, I think it was less than $4,000. It ruined my whole heater and system.
Just curious.
What?
Just curious. Doesn't ruin that unless it turns out there's some. She didn't take the city to the cleaners, did she?
I have no idea. I wasn't in charge of claims. They're contracted out to a firm that does them. And if you don't hear, it's deemed denied after a certain period. It's been 5-year claim. I don't know anything about this one. It's the first I've heard of this.
But you manage this firm you've contracted out to.
I did not. I've just been I'll let you finish. I just came on board as city attorney. This was not under my jurisdiction.
So that's interesting. Let's talk about settlements, and then Ms. Parker saying she came on board. Ms. Parker's been in the office for 21 years. She's been second in command for 10 years. We all know that John Russo he did many things, but he did not run that office day to day. So Ms. Parker is, she's been appointed city attorney for a year, but she actually has been running that office for a while. So when I talk about the city attorney's office, I think that it affects what is there. Settlements, a good example of a settlement that I think that that the settlements are not done in a timely manner is Deborah Edgley was a city manager. She was terminated at will. She could be terminated. Cheryl Thompson was her deputy. She was terminated. She wanted to settle for very little in a letter of recommendation. She deserved a letter of recommendation. She was a good employee. She was, the city attorney's office spent $500,000 defending that case. And then said that it would cost another about $400,000 to $500,000, $400,000 to $500,000 to take it to court with outside. They have
Who are we talking about now? I'm sorry.
Cheryl Thompson was a deputy. I'm
Under.
trying to go
Edgerly.
fast because you wanted it done
That's
fast, but
okay.
I'll slow down.
Cheryl Thompson was a deputy.
Deborah Edgerly was the
I
city
know who
manager.
We
Cheryl
remember
Thompson
her well.
was her deputy.
No.
They were very close.
No.
Cheryl Thompson was terminated.
Mm-hmm.
Cheryl Thompson was an at-will employee, so you can terminate an at-will employee
Terminated
by the city.
by this. Okay. By Edgerly or by?
No,
No, after Edgerly.
after Edgerly.
Yeah. Okay, so what was the issue?
The city attorney spent $500,000 hiring outside counsel to come in and help do that case, and then came to council and said it would cost another $500,000 to go to court. We probably could win. We could win, but we think you should settle because it was it will cost another.
Let's just be clear, Jane. What you're saying here, you are holding Barbara responsible for the Rousseau years.
This was in Barbara's time, but yes, I am holding Barbara responsible.
You've only been in this post a year.
Yes, July.
When?
July
July.
of 2011.
But she's been in the office, and you may disagree with me, but she's been in the office for 21 years. She's been second in command, and she's been running a good part of that office the whole time. So my point here is that if you're going to settle, you settle early. If you're going to win a case, you litigate. And I think the city of Oakland, there's some times that we should settle. There's some cops that, there's times that we need to settle. There's other times we need to litigate. And I think that it is important to not be the deep pocket and to sometimes litigate. I just recently had a case a while ago where I had representing two architects who were suing a public entity because no women had been advanced. When the settlement came in, we took it very seriously, very early, right before we were about to do 10 depositions and summary judgment, which is a very big production, and tried to settle it at a time when it was going to, because once you get doing a lot of work, the settlements become much more. So I think that's one. I think the city attorney's office is very expensive. If you
can you provide me data on numbers?
And I can give you the backup data for that. That's all public record on websites. So that is the city's, we took the city attorney's salary is determined by a group of cities that are the same size. I took those cities. And these are
what makes this Oakland City Attorney's office more complicated than these?
I think it's not run well, and I have experience.
Okay,
in
but you've been
Munster.
sitting on the city council approving this money for this. What makes it?
I think that it is not in. So coming out of private practice in an attorney's office, you have to respond very quickly. You have to be engaged. I have been in meetings where I have seen the city attorney present a case where the management, the staff that's there, the management from another department, it's the first time they've actually really discussed. When I get a case as an attorney, you dig in right away. You have to understand all the pieces.
Okay, let's let Barbara give her take on. We'll go. So, give me your assessment of why we should keep you in the job.
Mm-hmm.
And B, the issues that Jane raises.
Okay.
You know?
So first,
You sound like you got a.
I have this all the time. It's
Okay.
just gotten worse with this weather. I've had it for about a year, so my voice is a little strange. So I was appointed on July 19th by a majority of the city council, and I wanted to just kind of give you a background on
I remember.
where I'm coming from. So I'm the first generation of my family to go to college. I graduated from Harvard Law School. And my mother was a sharecropper, my father was a poor farmer. And they instilled in us the importance of hard work, education, and seeking justice and equality for all. So those have been sort of the guiding principles. So when I took office in July 19th, I had 3 priorities: public safety, streamlining services, and 3, being a watchdog for fair and honest practices.
Public safety, streamlining
services, and being a watchdog for fair and honest practices inside City Hall. And we've had a number of successes in this year. I'm running on my record. We have cut outside attorneys' cost by 40%
in the last year.
Settlements.
How have you managed to do that?
Several ways. One, I have made our attorneys who are top-notch work even harder. I've reorganized the office to change priorities, focusing on public safety. And I've established the first request for qualifications procedure that the city attorney's office has ever had, under which...
Request for qualifications from whom?
From anyone who wants to be an outside attorney or outside counsel.
So it's a request for qualifications for people who want to be outside attorneys then?
Correct. And so this means anybody who's interested in doing work can submit their credentials, and then we'll certify them. So it makes the process transparent, more competitive, and it helps us.
So what you've done is essentially created a competitive bidding process.
I call it a qualifications process because when you pick an attorney, you don't pick them solely on the basis of price.
But
it does help.
It opens the field to see what's the prices.
Right.
Okay.
So I've done that, and then we watch very closely as the outside counsel are working and fight with them about their prices and make the engagements very clear as to what exactly we're buying. One quick example I can give you: if you have a typical law firm, because of malpractice, if you give them a question, they might put 4 attorneys on it and research the law from the Magna Carta to the present. We don't need that, so we can tell them we want you to spend no more than 10 hours or whatever on it. So that's why I've done that.
Let me ask you one question, Barbara. Jane's obviously holding you responsible for the Russo years. Is that fair?
No, because I was not calling the shots. I was the second in command over the advisory division.
Over the what?
Advisory. That means I advised the city council, attended those meetings. I advised all the departments. Litigation was not under my purview. It was under Randy Hall, who's still the chief assistant, who reported directly to.
Okay, so help me understand how the office is organized. There's the city attorney.
And then there's 2 chief assistant city attorneys.
So you were one of the 2 chief assistants.
Yes, and I was over what's called advice, and Randy Hall is over what's called litigation.
Okay, so it was you were one of 2 advice chief deputies.
Yes.
Under Russo, and you were responsible for advice.
Advice. We did do some litigation, but not the jury trials and so forth. Writs, challenges to our ordinances. We did that.
The litigation primarily came under the other branch.
Yeah, all the trials and all the claims and all that were under Randy Hall, and they've been under me, of course, now as the new city attorney.
Sure, right.
But I did not. And John Russo called the shots. It's also important to note that with respect to
Jane seems to suggest that John was kind of a hands-off guy that let you guys run the ship.
He made the final decision, signed off on settlements and recommendations, certainly for high-profile cases like Cheryl Thompson and Deborah Ashley. I agree that he was, busy doing other things, and so with much advice and cases, regular trip and falls.
But suffice to say, by your perspective, the things that Jane is raising, the cases Jane is raising, weren't under your half of the organizational chart anyhow.
They were not, and they would be decisions that John would have made because they were high-profile matters. Let me also say that.
Let me just jump in one second.
No, let me just finish.
It wasn't that Cheryl Thompson was during her year.
Was what?
The settlement for Cheryl Thompson.
Well, let me explain. So in Cheryl Thompson, all this stuff she's talking about running up the cost, that was all under John. When I took office, I immediately brought the Cheryl Thompson case to closed session for the consideration. I did not recommend settlement, as she's erroneously stating. We presented the case. It was an expensive case. What she stated was the issue was not even the issue. She said she wanted a recommendation. If you look at the public file, what she wanted was severance pay. She wanted a 6-month severance, not a recommendation. I don't know if that was an issue. And under our rules, you can get severance if you're laid off without cause, which she might have qualified for, if it's part of your hiring agreement, which she admitted was not the case. So without debating it, I'm just explaining that under my regime, I brought it to the council, and my philosophy is to bring cases to the council early and keep them apprised so they can make decisions. The council has also the authority to settle every case over $5,000. And Ms. Bruner has voted to, over the years, until she became a candidate, has supported most of those decisions. But I think it's important to note that with Cheryl Thompson and Deborah Edgerly, because of the high-profile nature, there were other political and other considerations that were being taken into account in the philosophy.
So suffice it to say that that was being handled by John.
The decisions were being made.
On the Thompson case.
Yes. On those the strategy and so forth, yes. And when I became city attorney, so let me explain. So I was appointed by the council July 19th. John left, I think, May 13th or something, and I was acting. And it was during that time I brought Cheryl Thompson in before trial, and I do that with Tina. So I wanted to mention that. But the reason I'm running, and then I can come back to a couple of points if I may say, I'm running because I think it's that the city attorney is in a unique position to be a force for change by being a top-notch professional who does this work with the highest level of integrity, independence, and expertise, and providing that impartial advice where people know decisions are not being made based on who you are or power-based, but rather based on the law and working creatively with clients. And I think to do that, even though this is an elected position, politics should have no place in it. It's critical that you be a professional with broad experience so you can have the professional judgment to make the decisions that we have to make in Oakland on a day-to-day basis. It's like a law firm for $1 billion corporation. And I've been a practicing attorney full-time.
Let me ask you a question. You talked about public safety.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure I understand what that means in this.
As a priority.
Yeah. What do you do that you wouldn't do the same? In terms, what does public safety mean as a priority for the city attorney?
Okay, so if I could just finish with my expertise,
sure,
and then I'll come right back to that. So I've been a full-time practicing attorney for over 35 years. That's my profession. I've worked in the private sector for 2 major corporations, Pillsbury, Winthrop, you may be aware of, Brobeck, Flaker, Harrison. I worked for Kaiser Aluminum Chemical Corporation. I worked for Kaiser Hospitals, and I was an assistant U.S. attorney, so I have litigation experience, federal, state, transactional experience, and then I have 21 years of experience. And I think that's the kind of qualifications you need for a job, and that's what I bring to it. And I think since I've been in the office, just in this 1 year, that the council is becoming less dysfunctional because they feel that they can.
Dysfunctional, but that's okay.
Huh?
It's pretty dysfunctional.
I said less dysfunctional.
Okay.
Because they don't think I'm making a decision based on future, and that even John Russo, who is a supporter of mine and I regard highly, had difficulty coming off the council because he was viewed as a politician. And
I see what you're saying.
Making his decisions
So you're
based
saying
on
dysfunction surrounding legal issues.
Legal issues and everything else, but the response, it's very important to trust your attorney. So your question to me was public safety. And I can give you examples of what the city attorney has been doing. We're making it a higher priority. So hiring a police is necessary. We're short there. We don't control them.
Right.
But what we can do is using nuisance law and our other powers change the community. So we shut down those 2 motels that were centers of child prostitution, which changed the whole neighborhood. The businesses had been complaining that people didn't want to come and get services because the prostitutes and the pimps and everybody was coming up and down. There were rapes and kidnappings and murders. there were drugs. And so by doing that and our policing these various hotels, primarily International and MacArthur, and either making them good citizens or shutting them down, which is the first time it's ever happened in Northern California. Second, we've done the same thing with nuisance liquor stores. You know, shutting them down or changing their product line or having them shut down earlier and that kind of thing. All of these things affect crime. We've also gone after slumlords and shut some of those down. So that's the way we affect public safety.
Okay,
And in
I
addition, working closely with the police, giving them advice regarding trends we see that might help.
Okay, I'm with you.
So if I could just respond to, just quickly to the other point she was making.
Sure.
It's easy to make allegations.
And we'll come back to you, Jen.
Yeah.
I haven't forgotten.
Yeah, it's easy to make allegations. It's campaign season, but the facts, I think, speak for themselves. I've explained the Cheryl Thompson case. With respect to the claims, again, that was under litigation, so I don't know what happened to her claim. But if you look at this claim that we should settle cases early, it just kind of shows to me the absence of the knowledge of how things work. This is not a cookie cutter. You don't settle every case early. You don't litigate every case. You decide each case on its merits. And we make those decisions as we need to on a case-by-case basis. And if you look at our record, I brought with me, just for your information, some background on our recent report that you can take a look at. It gives you facts instead of, I brought you a copy of the bucket, because we've already given it to you. It tells you what our budget is. It tells you what's happened. We resolve 7 out of 10 claims for $0. And we win a majority of our lawsuits. And 91% of the claims never even ripen into litigation. So clearly we're doing a good job along with the other things that I
7 out of 10 claims for $0, and what was the rest of that?
So it's kind of hard. So you have 7 out of 10 or 0.
I just wasn't.
Okay. And then 91% of the claims never ripen into lawsuits. So even if you settle them for $5,000 or less, which is our authority, or the people just accept that you denied their claims and go away. So what we see in the papers and what people are always saying is you settle all your cases is just those few cases that are high profile cases. The Army base has not come to completion yet because it's a major hundreds of page document that's in ongoing negotiations. So, and we've been working very closely. We have a team on that. So it's, to me, it's just sort of a claim that, a suspicious claim. And the office being too expensive, again, it's, I think, a lack of knowledge of how a law firm works. We're actually cut to the bone. We've lost a third of our staff.
What you know, is her chart right? You know, and so what makes you guys so much more expensive? I know.
I don't know if the chart is right.
No. What's the source of those numbers? And what's the
Websites.
year?
Yeah, I don't know if it's right.
It's the budget. You go into each city and go to their budget.
And
But
what year?
It says we did the year that we can compare everybody to.
What I'd say, without knowing specific comparisons, is that, for example, the city of San Francisco.
What year is it?
I'm trying to find the year, and I'll have to get you the year. I think it's last year. It's not this year because we don't have people's budgets the year before.
Last year being.
I have to see if it's 10, 11, or 11, 12. This is
Okay. So what I was going to say is, if you can't compare apples and oranges. So if you look at a city like Oakland and the number of cases we have, the issues we have with our police being sued constantly, with our infrastructure, we're not equivalent just based on population. The city of San Francisco, for example, is twice our size. It has more than 200 attorneys. And I would never argue that
but
we
they're
should
also
have.
city and county.
I know. So I'm just saying, just using the same numbers,
Right.
I wouldn't say we should have 100 attorneys.
Right.
So you have to look at, and we have a very litigious group of people. We have many cases, and
We
we
do
have.
have an unusual population.
Yeah, we have a very active population, and I'm glad. That's why. Do you guys live in Oakland?
Pardon?
Do you live in Oakland?
I used to live.
Yeah, so you know it's a very active city with many interest groups and so forth.
I grew
So
up in
having 30, we have between 30 and 35, depending on is skeletal crew.
That's what it is. It's 30, 35 attorneys.
Mm.
Let's let Jane have a second to chime in because she seems chomping at the bit there.
No, I'm not.
Go for
I
it.
mean, you can use a lot of adjectives. I'm not, the Cheryl Thompson one, if I start saying something that they said, she's going to tell me I can't talk about it because it was a closed session. So it's easy to hide behind closed session. But I'll be very clear. The city attorney's office was pushing, and that was during Barbara's time, pushing
was pushing
the settlement for Cheryl Thompson, and not going to court to litigate, and they were basing it on that it was going to be cheaper
and you don't think it should have been settled?
No, I think if you can win a case, if you spent $500,000 defending a case and you believe it's winnable, and they were very clear, they believed it was winnable, you continue and you win that case.
So
$1 million
let me wrap my head about this.
$1 million is a lot.
What you're saying is they spent a lot of money, and that would have been before Barbara came.
Correct.
Took charge.
And
then they came in there and said we should settle it
because it would take another $500,000. So settle it for $450,000. That's a lot of money.
And you're saying you came in there and said, "Don't settle."
No, I didn't say don't settle.
What did you say?
We came in and we presented the case to them because I thought it was important before they went to trial that we told them there was a cost-benefit analysis, which is as she described. You pay another $400,000. And then there are the principles of policy and so forth, and we presented those to the council for its consideration and decision.
Okay, let me give you my quick analysis of this.
But as an attorney?
No, let me give you a quick analysis first so you can respond to this, okay? Because it's the economist side of me that, the public policy side of me that thinks about what the notion of sunk cost. And I hear what you're saying, you don't want to sink a lot of money into a case that's settled early. But it sounds like the costs that were sunk were in the previous regime, if you will, under John.
That is correct.
And there was not only under John, but it was under the other branch. So it wasn't under Barbara's, this wasn't Barbara's case.
Barbara ran closed session. Barbara sat on the dais for the years that Russo was there. Barbara presented herself as the person, and most everything, when you asked a question, went through Ms. Parker's office to get to other things. But I'm saying that what's really serious in Oakland is we are the deep pockets. We've made a couple of attorneys, Burris being one of them, very wealthy people. When it comes to cases, I think that the analysis of when we should settle, when something really wrong happens, doesn't happen early enough. And I have observed this over and over again. And I just use one example, but it doesn't happen early enough. And we end up in huge settlements. A case right now that's in front of us where it's many plaintiffs, and I have asked for an analysis of who the plaintiffs are, what are they claiming, and what is our own police saying. I have not gotten that analysis. The answer I got is you couldn't get that until they did many depositions. I disagree with that. I think that you at least need to know who the plaintiffs are, what they did, and what our own staff says. So my claim is that you need to do early work. Otherwise, we're the city's the deep pocket. Anyone who's touched by a police officer has a claim, and they're pretty sure they're going to get it settled. And I think that sometimes you need to settle. I don't disagree that you take case by case. It's not one or all. I'm not saying you settle everything or that you negotiate. I'm actually known for doing a lot of settlements and mediations and with arbitrations and National Labor Relations Boards and trials where I have done the settlement and mediated a lot of cases. So I'm not suggesting you don't settle. I'm suggesting that you have to have done the work.
I would just say in response, we do that work. And again, I think it's the professional judgment I have, having run the office, having been a litigator. You know, each case is a case-by-case analysis. There are some cases where it's clear that it's a loser. You bring it in, you present it to the council, and they say it's not worth it to spend the time for discovery and depositions to get to this point. There are other cases where that's a direction you take. And I just completely dispute her characterization of the way we handle cases. We have excellent attorneys and excellent analyses that are provided to the council in a timely manner. I think it's just a sort of an allegation that's easy to make without any substance to it.
On settlements, pardon my ignorance on this, it's strictly the council's call on approving it, or does, if there's a deadlock, does the mayor get dragged in? How's it get?
Well,
you know, I mean, Oakland's kind of an unusual beast.
we have $5,000, so we settle claims.
Right. Okay. So you have settlement authority
for $5,000.
Yeah, but above that.
Beyond that, under the charter, under Jerry Brown's strong mayor, if there's a tie, 4-4, then the mayor can weigh in.
Okay. So it's like any other issue.
But in real life, not theory, real life. In real life, when very complicated cases come in front of a city council, you're dealing with 7 or 8 issues in an hour and a half or 2 hours. You're presented with a settlement. You rely.
Sure.
You have to rely on your attorney's advice. Yeah. And so I think it's not, it's not that it's up to the council, because it is the advice, and it's the options, and it's the pros and cons, and it's giving you risk. And I think that is critical of what an attorney is supposed to do. So you can't, I think it's difficult where at one point they say she's saying it's just a city council, but if you're not in the middle of that litigation and you have anywhere from 15 minutes to an hour and a half to understand it, usually you don't have an hour and a half. You're relying on your city attorney to advise you. So it is the advice of the city attorney.
Do you think you get bad advice?
I think I get advice that doesn't give me options, and I have thought this for years. I think that...
Have you expressed that?
Yes.
To whom?
To Ms. Parker.
That's not true.
When I was president of the council, Ms. Parker, you and I had this conversation. I have always asked, 2 things I've been asking for some years. One is, in legal memos, that you cite, that the cases are cited, that 2 things that we need is, and they have gotten a little better at citing cases, but for a long time, that we have a legal memo, that you actually put the facts out, you cite cases, and what those cases stand, and we get pros and cons.
Well, I guess I'm sort of running blind unless you guys want to start sharing some of these.
Yeah, see, that's my problem. If I say to you, it
cuts both ways.
Yeah, I'd be happy to share it, and she would tell me I'm speaking out of a Brown Act violation, so I'm not going to do that.
If it's a confidential legal opinion, it can't be.
So you're hiding behind a close.
I'm not hiding behind it. I'm just saying it's the council's privilege that it could waive, but we can't give you.
But so let me just say.
Well, I understand
what
that.
I
It is
need,
the council's.
What I need is risk. So when a client comes to me, and I have clients come to me all the time, and they say to me, "I want to do this," it is the client's decision what they do. But you, as an attorney, you give them the risk. So there's some things they can do. There's a low risk. There's some things that will be a higher risk, and there's some things that it's a great risk. So an example. So that is what. Very rarely do we get the outline of those risks given to us.
Let me ask you both a question. Should this be an elective office, and why are we not in that?
I think the voters. I think it should be an elected office. I think the voters have decided by 72 or 73% that they want it to be an elected office. So it is an elected office. I actually think that I am a professional. I've been a professional for many, many years. But I also think this is a political office, and the city is political, and some of the decision makers are political. So it is actually helpful to understand how the politics in a city work, to be an attorney. I don't believe the attorney makes a decision, and many attorneys hide behind law and pretend they're not doing politics by giving you, and I'm sure all of us have seen it, where they give you legal advice and it's really their opinion. I think what's really critical for an attorney, city attorney, is to put out the legal opinions, put out the options, and let the decision makers make it. So you have four people who are making decisions, and they're different decisions. You have the mayor. Some decisions are just under her purview. You have the city manager. You have the city council, but then you have residents and businesses. Because you're elected, you're also responsible to residents and businesses. And I think the role is to give advice and let that decision maker, whoever it is, and so it's different people at different times, make the political decision with the correct information in front of them.
Barbara, should it be elected?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. I voted to retain it as an elected position last November. There's two different schools of thought of looking at it. One is that an appointed city attorney doesn't have to run for office, doesn't have to get out there and be in the political arena, and therefore they're more impartial. And then there's the other one that says they're more impartial because they're elected and they only have a duty to the people. I think that it depends on who the person is who's running, and it depends on who the council is that's overseeing them. And so it's kind of a tough question, but I'm comfortable with the decision that's been made. I do think that because of a citywide office and running for it, this is my first time running since high school, that...
Did you win in high school?
Huh?
No, I was just being funny. Maybe not so funny. I was trying to be funny.
Oh, I didn't hear. I just didn't hear.
I said, did you win in high school?
I did. Have 100% record so far. That there aren't a lot of people like me who will necessarily run. As I said, I didn't plan to run. I kind of evolved into it. And when John decided to leave, I actually talked to some other people and said, are you interested, who I considered to be, top-notch attorney types? And they said, no way, I'm not interested in being in that arena. So if it does tend to lead to people who are more interested in using it as a platform or for some other reason, then the elected could be sort of negative. But at the same time, I think if I'm retained, because I'm kind of the best of both worlds, I think I'd be retained, and I'm not a politician looking for to go someplace. And I think in San Francisco they've had pretty good success, I think, with getting good, sound elected officials.
Anything else I need to know, folks? About this race as we ponder all this. I don't want to keep you folks here that long.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I
mean, we know both of you are.
Yeah.
You're not mysteries like, 3/4 of these council candidates, non-incumbents who walk in here,
okay.
who are clueless. You guys, we know you guys. We know what you've done, and you're not mysteries to us. Yeah.
So we sent some literature to you. I think it includes my endorsement list. I know you make your own independent endorsement, but I thought it might be useful.
I don't know where. I'm not sure where it is. So if you want to send me an email with stuff,
Okay. I think that we sent you something earlier today.
Oh, you may have sent me something.
Yeah, you've been here.
Yeah.
I'm
sitting and buried in interviews.
I have very broad support in the legal community from the president of the state bar, the president of the Alameda County Bar Association, and past presidents. Every lawyers bar association that has endorsed in the race has endorsed me, and they're on different sides. Some of these are plaintiffs' attorneys, some are defense, because they want a professional, independent city attorney. I also have strong support from many factors, past chiefs of police, the Chamber of Commerce PAC, the Democratic Party, and all the Democratic organizations, including the Alameda County Democratic. There's 4 council members and others. So I think it shows the wide depth and breadth of the support, and you can look at the list.
Okay.
I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I'll let you speak. I might have something else that I wanted to
I have
add.
the support of Assemblymember Sanjay Swanson, Councilmember Desley Brooks, former City Manager Robert Bobb, Oakland Police Association, Oakland Firefighters, Phil Tagami from the Army Base, Kate O'Hare from the community-based groups. I have support that is very broad. I have a long list that if you want it,
If you want to email me,
we'll email you
if you guys want to email,
list of
email me
endorsements.
whatever you want me to bring to Dan and
Mhm.
for us to consider. You know, send it on.
Okay.
Okay, I was trying to
Okay.
think if
We're
there's
going to have a
anything
piece of literature there that
Yeah,
has some information. If you want backup reports for
Yeah, I
that.
would like to know the backup to your numbers.
And take a look at this, because this gives you
Okay.
facts in the mid-year report.
Folks, I appreciate it. You know, I don't want to keep you guys here too late. And frankly, if you're mysteries, we'd be at it another 40 minutes
Okay.
or so. But you neither of you are mysteries to us. You
Okay.
know.
One last thing I wanted to say, I talked about the public safety a bit, and I think you understand why I'm streamlining. I talked the watchdog. You're probably aware of the memo I sent out reminding council members. It was a memo that became very a big deal in the press, which kind of surprised me. Over the years, there's been a loss of the role of the city council member as setting policy and the administration as hiring and firing contracts. And I sent out a memo, and this is viewed as being a very strong signal as a watchdog. And so I'm continuing to do that. And on transparency with respect to public records and so forth.
What prompted the memo?
There's been an issue over the years, but
Or was this
this was what happened was a council member had engaged in certain activity, and then they came to our office to get the contract approved for payment,
the
and it
retroactive
ultimately.
contract?
Well, we have a lot of those, that happen after the fact, but it hadn't gone through the process, so we rejected it, and it came to council.
As soon as you started to answer the question,
Okay.
it all came back to me.
So I have no problems, and people were saying, I'm just kind of surprised that you said that when 5 of the council members voted to appoint you, and some of them might not be happy about that. So I am a person of integrity and independence and high expertise, and I love Oakland.
So, it's interesting that you pointed out. I do not manage direct staff. Recently, the Chronicle reported, I don't think you folks reported on it, that there was a report where a police officer had a camera, and there was a report analyzing what that camera showed in the incident, and that report was not given to the police officer's attorney, nor do I believe it was given to the chief. That officer was terminated. Accidentally, they found out about the report. It was a report that the city attorney's office had. They found out about that report, and the chief had to rescind the termination. So, we're going to go looking at both sides. The question is, and they're investigating why that report was not given out, and what was happened with it. But that's pretty serious, that you have an investigative report that someone's actually terminated, and it was not made public and it's legally they need to give it to the officer, and I believe they did not give it to the chief.
So the facts on this case, the officer was not terminated under the law because they have a property interest. They're entitled to the Skelly notice that says these are the charges, this is the action we plan to take, and the city is required to give the officer all the evidence. This report was not done by my office. This is a report commissioned by the city, by the police department. It was a shooting case. It was a really sad case. The person died. The officer was then slated for termination. The use of force board looked at it, and they split on it or something. And the chief said, I think he violated policy, and he set him up for termination. This report was not included. It wasn't our decision not to include it. As soon as it came to our attention, we advised the police to present it. It's a very poor situation, and the city administrator is going to investigate what happened, because this person had to live for 3 months or however long under the cloud of thinking he was going to lose his job, and so while he was never terminated because it was rescinded before, it's a bad situation. But my office was not.
I believe there's a bar charge against the city attorney because of this report. So
with politics.
I don't think it's politics.
It is.
So I mean, you can say anything's politics, but I think that there is an investigation, and we'll learn about it.
We're going to retain the person to do the investigation who would be investigating the police department. And there was an allegation to this effect, but it's a political season. So I think that's. I was expecting to be here for 2 hours.
No.
After the other guys came out, so we're kind of surprised.
At some point, even I have to go home.
Yes.
And I'm sure you folks do too.